What's up, nerds? Zach the Goblin here. Warhammer 40k is amazing. When you think of 40k, you probably imagine the horrors of everyday life, never-ending wars across the galaxy, bio-engineered super soldiers, and eldritch abominations. Now, that grim darkness is what makes 40k so great, but some of my favorite things about the setting is when things get a little silly. Now, this can either come from comic relief moments and characters, or even sometimes the over-the-top edginess itself can be a little goofy. Okay, so we have done so many of these videos at this point. Now, I can't imagine there will be another one of these, but I've thought that before, and you all just keep surprising me, so who knows? Let me know your funny moments in the comments below. If this is the last one, I will do a final wrap-up video going over comments that didn't make one of these for one reason or another. If you enjoy this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe for more Warhammer 40k content. So, potentially for the last time, here are 10 of your funniest Warhammer 40k moments. It's Goblin time. It has been a while since I have talked about one of my favorite characters, Caiaphas Cain, in one of these videos. So to start us off, we are going to commenter Melon Mike 225, who says, "A moment I still think about is a brief intro line to one of the chapters in the later half of The Traitor's Hand, a great Caiaphas Cain book." I agree with that. The line goes something like, "I am unstoppable," last words of some Chaos Space Marine the Immortal. Now, the exact quote is a little different, and I'll get into that, but first, some context. In this book, Caiaphas Cain and the Valhallans are deployed to the tidally locked world of Adumbria, which has a Slaneshi cult among its populace, as well as an approaching fleet of followers of Khorne. So throughout the book, they're preparing and fighting the forces of chaos, and Caiaphas Cain stuff ensues. Caiaphas Cain actually at one point holds his own against a Khornate berserker. None of that really matters to the quote. I just like talking about Caiaphas Cain books, so, But each chapter usually starts with a quote, and the quote for chapter 18 is, "Well, that was unexpected. Last words of the Chaos War Master, Varen, the Undefeatable." But yeah, that quote doesn't really need any context. It is just funny. It's a self-contained joke. Again, I didn't really need to give any context, but if you haven't yet, you should definitely check out the Caiaphas Cain books. They are peak. Okay, so for the next one, we go to commenter Splat Squid Harry, who brought up a quote which comes from the book Mortarion, the Pale King, by David Annandale. So the short context of this quote is Mortarion and the Death Guard is fighting against the Order during the Great Crusade. The Order kind of reminds him of the tyranny back on his old planet. The Order being a human empire residing in the Galaspar cluster. Not to be confused with the Order on Caliban. But anyways, because the Order reminded Mortarion so much of the overlords of Barbarous, it made him a little impatient and angry. He wanted to liberate the people now. So the Death Guard is fighting the Order, and eventually Mortarion's able to get troops on the ground of the capital world, which is effectively game over. The Death Guard win. So at this point, the comptroller, Vichiez, finally reaches out to Mortarion, and that's where the quote comes from. "This is your chance to speak," he said to Vichiez. "Use it well." "What are your terms?" Vichiez asked. "There are none." Another pause. A confused one this time. "I don't understand." "I spoke clearly," said Mortarion. "I will repeat myself. There are no terms." "But we wish to surrender." "You can't." "But we no longer wish to fight you." "That was never your choice. I came to destroy you. What you do in response to that is up to you. It is no concern of mine." Now, I find this is one of those moments where the edginess just kind of makes it funny to me. Because they're just like, "Hey, we want to give up now. Please." Mortarion's just like, "No, it doesn't matter. There's really no point to us even talking right now. You're all gonna die." And I don't know, imagining the comptroller just getting more and more scared and frustrated, while Mortarion's just sitting there super unbothered, is just kind of funny to me. Again, in kind of an over-the-top trying to be cool, edgy sort of way, if that makes sense. As you all probably know, I like to add a few of my own things to these videos. So these next two don't come from comments. Sticking with the theme of quotes that go hard and are also kind of funny in context, this comes from the book Xenos by Dan Abnett. Now, this is a quote a lot of people probably already know. But for context, Eisenhorn is hunting down a serial killer, and he successfully does so, but during the process, the killer triggered a systematic failure in the facilities they were in, leading to thousands of deaths. In the aftermath, Eisenhorn is placed under arrest by the planet's Regency government, who accuse him of driving the serial killer to the planet. Eisenhorn allows himself to be detained and questioned. Even though he doesn't really have to, he's an inquisitor. He is being questioned by their leader, Nisime Carpel, and towards the end of the questioning, he produces a data slate that has evidence that the serial killer was going to the planet regardless of Eisenhorn, not because he was driven there by him. And that if Eisenhorn wasn't there to stop it, the consequences would have been way worse. So at the end of this exchange, after he presses and flusters Carpel, Eisenhorn says, "You were wide open. He exploited you. Don't blame me for anything except being too late to stop him. As I said, you have my sincere condolences. And next time you choose to confront an Imperial Inquisitor," I added, "you may want to be more respectful. I'm excusing a lot because I recognize the trauma and loss you have suffered, but my patience isn't limitless, unlike my authority." But yeah, that ending line, "my patience isn't limitless, unlike my authority," goes so hard. And in the context, it's kind of funny because here's the leader of a planet, and this Inquisitor is just giving it to him because, like he said, his authority is essentially limitless. And to me, what makes it extra funny is that that line in this context is kind of just being used as a fuck you. And I don't know, I got a good chuckle when I read that. Okay, so this next thing is actually two things, but they come from the same book and involve the same character, so I don't feel like I can count them as two separate things, and I'm just gonna combine them into one. These both come from the novella Prince of Crows by the GOAT, Aaron Dembski-Bowden. And both of these involve the Night Lord's first captain, Sevatar. Some brief context without spoiling too much, as I do think this is a good book and you should read it. At the beginning of the book, Conrad Kurz is put on death's door, leading to Sevatar trying to save the Night Lords from annihilation. So Sevatar has all these well-laid plans, and they're being pursued by the Dark Angels, but are looking like they're gonna get away. But then Kurz wakes up and voxes into Sevatar, and he's like, "Well, welcome back, father," with Kurz saying, "We can finish this now. Join me." And Sevatar's just like, "Let me guess, you plan to teleport onto the Invincible Reason, don't you?" With Kurz saying, "I have a fight to finish." With Sevatar reaching for his spear saying, "Yes, of course you do. Does it not matter that in a handful of minutes we can punch out through the Angel's rear guard and rip into the warp?" With Kurz just ignoring that. With Sevatar later just musing, "This is why the Imperials always win. They don't get in each other's way. Discipline may be dull, but it has undeniable military application. How long until we fire boarding pods?" And I just think that it's funny that this Night Lord is just, of course we're gonna mess everything up. You know, we have this perfect plan, but no. And not only that, but then he just goes along with it. He's like, "Well, I guess we're doing this now." And I don't know, the fact that, again, he's a Night Lord kind of makes this whole interaction even funnier to me. And the next one comes from the chapter after that, where Sevatar hitches a ride on a fighter craft because the teleportation has gone down, and he has no other way to get to the Dark Angel's flagship. So he calls a fighter into the bay, and the moment it touches down, he just jumps up, grabs the edge of one of the wings, pulling himself up with one hand, and voxes go. And the funny part about this interaction is there is no answer, and Sevatar glances over to the cockpit with one of the crew just staring back at him wide-eyed, and the pilot hunched round in her throne trying to see what was going on, until finally she just voxes, you can't be serious." Because yeah, to them it's just like, you're just gonna hang on to the side of a spacecraft? Like, huh? And then the pilot continues, "Sevatar, this is insane." But Sevatar just rolling his eyes, thinking how tiring it was to hear those words yet again. Sometimes he wondered if duty was just a word to other people, and they never truly grasped its meaning. It's funny, his like nonchalant attitude about it. He's just like, yeah, another day in the office. And again, the fact that a Night Lord's being kind of goofy just makes it even funnier to me. Okay, next up we have something that isn't strictly Warhammer related. I'm mostly just cheating and using this so I can have 10 things in this video. But this is a follow-up from a previous video. Well, technically a second follow-up. From context, I'm just gonna play the clip. This comes from commenter Thomas Falanka 3220, who writes, "Who pulls their balls out when they pee?" Now, this is a question for the ages, of course. But first I want to give a little background. This is in response to something I talked about in the first video of the series, and it was an excerpt from the book Legion by Dan Abnett. And I'm not going to repeat it here, but it described a back and forth between Alfarius of the Alpha Legion, who has something of a confrontation and back and forth with Hetman Hurtado Bronzi, who is in the process of pissing. And in the process of this, there's some dick and ball jokes, and I just thought it was funny that a Primarch is making ball jokes with a normal soldier, right? Just that whole image is really funny. But Thomas brings up a good point. For them to be making those jokes, that means when Hurtado Bronzi was peeing, his testicles were also out, right? And so we asked the question, who takes out their balls when they pee? I don't know if I'm telling on myself here, but I do. Is that crazy? Am I the only one? I included this comment mostly because it was just funny, right? It's a funny question, but also because now I'm concerned. Am I weird for pulling out my balls when I pee? Who else does this? Let me know in the comments below. We need the answers to these very important questions. And I surprisingly got a good amount of replies. Here is a quick montage of some of my favorites. Okay, this next one comes from commenter Extreme Allen, who mentions Zandrek, the Necron with Dementia. I believe other people have commented about him too, but this is the one I found. I'm pulling most of this information from the 8th edition Necron Codex. So Zandrek is one of the greatest generals in the Necron dynasties. Yet, for all of his military genius, Zandrek kind of lives in his own little world. His mind suffered damage during the Great Sleep, and as a consequence, he is trapped deep in the past. In his mind, he's still a creature of flesh and blood and not a scary robot guy. And because of this, he has his own little quirks. He is one of the few Necron overlords to employ the full protocols of honorable war against all encroachers. He ensures that enemy commanders are captured, not killed, and thereafter treated as honored prisoners, much to the outrage of his royal court. He's just fundamentally playing a different game than everybody else. And what allows him to do this is his Varguard Oberon. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, so I apologize if I got that wrong. Unlike his master, Oberon is very much aware of the changers wrought upon their existence, but has long since abandoned any attempt to awaken Zandrek to reality. So he just kind of goes with it and ties up all the loose ends created by Zandrek's shenanigans behind the scenes. For example, he makes sure that those honored prisoners of war are killed while trying to escape, and that upstart lords of the royal court are either silenced or disposed of. And I just think it's funny. Zandrek is just doing his thing, stuck in his delusions, living his best life, and Oberon is behind the scenes working overtime to make sure everything goes well. And I don't know. A delusional Necron is funny by itself, but I think combining that with kind of a guardian angel character just makes everything funnier to me. Okay, so the next thing comes from commenter J_V159, who says, a moment that I found pretty interesting in Warhammer 40k was the time that Abaddon is quite the cocktail connoisseur. This comes from the book The Talon of Horus, again by the GOAT, Aaron Dembski-Bowden. Later in the book, Xander Kaon and his group find the soon-to-be War Master Abaddon aboard the ship the Vengeful Spirit. So Abaddon is showing them around, showing all of the trophies he has obtained since his absence after the traitors were pushed into the Eye of Terror. He eventually offers the group some refreshments, and the refreshment he offered turned out to be a clear spirit that left a faint burn on the back of the tongue, with Kaon remarking that he is being generous when he says that it had the raw chemical taste of engine coolant. The beverage came from a barrel with warnings of acidic toxicity poured into flasks of twisted white metal. Kaon had the uncomfortable feeling that Abaddon was actually making an effort to be hospitable, one of the group refusing to even touch the liquid, with Kaon taking a flask out of courtesy. And then he hears a "this is good" from the World Eater Lihor as he drank the clear liquid. "My thanks, Captain." Kaon then brushes his senses over Lihor's mind, curiosity forcing him to seek any sign of deception. Unbelievably, the World Eater was telling the truth. He actually liked it. So I think that's funny by itself. This drink is so rancid that 2 Space Marines are like, yeah, no, I'm not gonna drink that. That looks terrible. And then out of nowhere, the World Eater, of course it's a World Eater, is like, damn, this is some premium shit you got here. But then it continues to be funny when Abaddon cuts in saying, it's adrenochrome, harvested from the adrenal glands of living slaves, and mixed with several artificial compounds, including a formula that I developed while trying to synthesize ectoplasma. And then they continue talking about it as if they're like sipping a fine wine, while continuing to talk about the ingredients. Oh, what materials did you use? Abaddon swirling his his glass. Oh, you know, the tears of virgins, the blood of children, with Kaon removing his helmet, just staring at him, unsure if he's telling the truth. Lior chuckling and saying, funny, as he downs the rest of his drink. So to me, there's two things funny about this. One, and the big thing, is that, again, Abaddon, the future War Master of Chaos, is developing drinks in his spare time for fun. And while the other two are a little grossed out, the World Eater's like, damn, this is some good shit. And to top it all off, they start talking about other things, and Lior leans over to Kaon asking, hey, are you gonna drink that? With Kaon wordlessly just handing the flask over to him, with Lior following up saying, you should drink while you can. With he really just not understanding why they don't want to drink it, because to him, this is like the best shit ever. And I don't know, the whole interaction between them is just super funny to me. And I said it in the last video, but I think that this book, followed by its sequel, The Black Legion, are must-reads, and I would highly suggest checking them out. Okay, so this next one comes from commenter MaxNixLeben3334, who says, also in the first Heretic, when a priest peed himself just next door to Lorgar. Like he said, this comes from the book The First Heretic by Aaron Dembski-Bowden. Again, there's a theme here. I swear I didn't plan that. Okay, for context, Lorgar and Magnus are talking in the Spired Temple on Colchis, and this is shortly after the destruction of Monarchia. Things aren't going well between them, and Magnus teleports back to wherever he came from and blows the top off the temple in the process. And this understandably startles the Astartes and civilians. So Argol Tal and some other word bearers are trying to get to the top to figure out, you know, what's going on, and people are just freaking out. So Argol Tal has enough, and he's like, control your emotions and move aside, or I will kill you. The priest saying, you cannot mean that, Lord. Then faster than human eyes could follow, the swords of red iron came free in hissing rasps, the tips of both blades resting against the fat priest's 3 chins before he'd even had time to blink. Apparently, he did mean it. Yes, the deacon stammered. Yes, I... Just move, Argoltal suggested. The priest took the suggestion, trying not to burst into tears. As he moved, an animal scent tainted the air, stronger than the fierce sweat and sour breath from the priests around him. Sir, one of the other word bearers voxed. The priest, pissed in his robes. So, you know, I'm not gonna say it's not understandable, and Astartes yelling at me while I'm already terrified and threatening to kill me would probably scare the piss out of all of us, if we're being honest. But you know, when people pee themselves, it's kind of funny. And it's also funny that the other word bearer switched to Vox rather than speaking aloud, and he's just like, hey, this guy pissed himself. And I don't know, I agree with the commenter, and I do find that moment kind of funny. There's a bit in one of the Siege of Terra books where Dorn accidentally interrupts Kirill Cinderman from killing himself, and after a long pep talk conversation about how important the whole thing is, he leaves. While leaving, he turns to Cinderman and says, oh, also, please use the stairs, because he knew he was about to jump. This comes from the book Saturnine by Dan Abnett, and is actually one of the first things that happens in the book. I saved this one to towards the end of the video because, while it does end in some humor, it's also kind of heartwarming more than anything. And also the fact that suicide is kind of a heavy topic and not necessarily funny, but because of the heartwarming nature of it and the fact that it ends with some funny, made me decide to include it. At this point in the Horus Heresy, Cinderman had essentially given up hope and climbs to the top of one of the last gardens in the Imperial Palace and stands upon one of the ledges, thinking of committing suicide by stepping off, and is musing to himself, asking if the Emperor could have known about this or prevented it, when he suddenly hears you talking to me? Turns out Dorn was there the whole time. Dorn asking Cinderman, were you going to jump? With Cinderman replying, no, I don't think I was at least. Dorn saying, it's all right to be afraid. Cinderman asking, are you afraid? That's not a luxury I'm permitted, he said at length. Do you wish you were? I don't know. I don't. Dorn faltered. I don't know what it feels like. What does it feel like? Cinderman shrugged. How do you feel? I feel a biting at my throat, a pounding inflammation of my mind. I feel the limit of my ability, and yet I must give more, and I don't know where that will come from. Then Cinderman says, then I think, if I may be so audacious as to say so, you are feeling afraid. Dorn's eyes widened slightly. He stared into the distance. Really? That's a very bold thing to say to me, Cinderman. Agreed, said Cinderman. I apologize. 30 seconds ago, I was intent on flinging myself from the parapet, so speaking truth to a Lord Primarch is not quite so daunting as perhaps it once might have been. Actually, that's a lie. Now I think on it, offending you is more alarming than the prospect of my own death. I can't believe I said that. And then they go on talking about fear, and it's really a humanizing moment for Rogel Dorn, who, for the most part, is this iron will slab of stone, right? And actually, what's more funny to me than what the commenter says is at one point, Cinderman asks, "What are you afraid of?" And Dorn says, "Too many things. Everything. For now, I'm simply afraid of the idea that I can, after all, know fear." He paused, then as an afterthought, "Ugh, for throne's sake, don't tell Rabute." And I think that's hilarious. Like, he's just like, oh my god, if you tell Gilliman, I'm never going to live this down. And then they talk about some more stuff until finally Dorn turns and says, "I must return to my post. And so must you. Go down, Remembrancer. Do your work so that mine can matter hereafter." "I will, Lord." Take the stairs, please." Cinderman grinned. "Most amusing, Lord." And it's heartwarming and then also kind of comical to see this demigod try to navigate something as serious as suicide. But while it's serious, it's something that he can't really comprehend, right? Like, until the death of Ferrus Manus, he wasn't even sure if he could die. So seeing him navigate this is kind of funny in a serious way. And that, yeah, to top it off when he's like, "Hey, I'm gonna return to my post, and so must you. Go down, you know?" And then he like kind of stops. He's like, "Take the stairs, please. Go down, but don't jump down, you know? Take the stairs." So yeah, I think the comment about Rabute Gilliman is funnier, but I do think it's fun, and I like that this exchange ends with Rogel Dorn making a joke. Okay, so for this last one, we're going back to pure Goofy, and this comes from commenter Minimal BS Tolerance 8113. "I recall a story from the 3rd edition Imperial Guard Codex about Nork Deddog, the Ogren bodyguard, and how a wounded colonel told him to get a medkit. Nork then proceeds to drag a chimera back to the colonel. When the colonel says, 'I told you to bring me a medkit, not a chimera,' Nork, quite reasonably, for an Ogren, points out that the medkit is in the chimera, sir." And indeed, as the commenter says, this story is in the 3rd edition Imperial Guard Codex. It's a short little passage, and honestly, I think the commenter sums it up perfectly. The only thing I'm going to add is after he says the medkit is in the carrier, the colonel, through gritted teeth and pain, just is like, "Good thinking, Nork. Now bring the medkit over here," with Nork just being like, "Yes, sir," and plunged himself into the chimera, remembered he had forgotten to salute, so comes back out, salutes twice for good measure, and then busied himself searching for the vehicle's medical supply chest. Nork is a pretty fun character. In the 5th edition Imperial Guard Codex, it's noted that by Ogren standards, Nork is a veritable genius. He can sign his own name, N is for Nork, count to 4, his thumb still confuses him though, and even speak in short sentences. Such precocious development in one of his race inevitably came to the attention of the commissars, and Nork soon found himself placed on special duties. Nork has personally saved the lives of over 100 officers, and by doing so has been instrumental in securing victories on dozens of worlds. Nork has a large collection of medals, laurels, citations, and personal gifts, including the Commissar's cap. It is not for trinkets or baubles that Nork Deddog continues to serve, although he is particularly proud of his big shiny buttons, but rather it is for the content feeling he gets when fighting at a friend's side. But yeah, Nork Deddog is a hilarious character, and also just kind of heartwarming. He is just a genuinely good and innocent dude, which in the 40k universe is hard to come by. But yeah, I like him. And I'm going to end this segment with a quote from him. "The Sergeant Major asked me what my job was, and I said it was to, do what I was told. He said I was a genius and gave me another medal. I likes the Imperial Guard." Okay, and that will do it. Thank you again for staying till the end of the video. It means so much. As you all know, I appreciate each and every one of you. As I said at the beginning of the video, this will probably be the last one, but again, you guys keep on surprising me in the comments, so I could very well be wrong. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really does help the channel out. Thank you guys again. You all are amazing. Until next time, Goblin out.